We have the one, the only, Zev Solomon, the principal of ZSD Development. Looking towards the new year, we are in 2024. What do you see as coming in new construction? What are you personally looking to do? What neighborhoods do you think are going to be hot?
God, I wish I knew all the answers.
These are
to that.
crystal ball questions. I admit that.
No, so I'll tell you what I'm seeing. So the Gold Coast, the upper end of the Gold Coast is interesting. There's need there. There's nothing available, and we talked about the single family and row home product that's there, some of which is very large, some of which is very grand, but that doesn't seem to be moving. Yet my very large, very expensive condos have sold. They address some of the issues. We have parking, we have outdoor space. That neighborhood hasn't historically had that. So we hit on something there. I think there's depth in that market still. The West Loop probably still has depth. I got more calls on Madison and Carpenter when I was sold out and not advertising and not on the MLS than I did on projects I was actively advertising. Some of what we aimed to do that was at the next level price point down for Madison Carpenter, that buyer who was targeted at $1 million with a 4% interest rate, they're really getting stuck now because they can't afford what I designed to sell to them because it wasn't done. We've lost the interest rate piece. And so their buying power isn't there. I mentioned to you that I think Hyde Park is interesting. We're exploring some stuff down there. I think there's pent up demand there, but I have made a habit out of staying core for the last several years, and not straying too far.
Do you think we're going to start to see some more housing starts in the new year, especially from the townhome and condo range? I mean, I know a lot of this stuff gets planned a year or two ago.
So no, I don't expect a lot. I've heard every developer I know who's a developer of scale, most bigger than me, are working on projects outside Chicago. And that's been a trend that's been going on for years. But all of the people I talk to are out of Chicago, in various different markets, mostly doing rental, a couple doing for sale. And so I don't know of a lot of projects being talked about in the city, and certainly nothing of scale, because the scale stuff between the zoning process, the neighborhood stuff, the city processes, the financing piece, it's really, really hard.
Yep. On that realm, do you think that we'll continue to see some level of push towards the rental aspect, or you think that phase is a little bit tiered out?
Well, Chicago this year was the fourth best performing city on absorption of newly delivered rental product. We don't tend to fare in the top 10 of much of anything when it comes to reports. So it's notable. And Chicago still has this huge concentration of educated young people downtown. And so Chicago's really a tale of two cities. You have the core, which behaves radically differently than the city in totality. So when they talk about population loss, it's not necessarily downtown. It's the population as a whole. So on the rental, I mean, there's almost no new product being planned for delivery in 2025. There's a cliff. Like we fall off a cliff because of the pandemic, because of interest rates, because of construction, because of zoning. There's a cliff. So there's a really unknown after 2024. And my crystal ball is foggy.
Okay, so one last question, and I'm going to admit in advance it's a little unfair. But since I tell you it's unfair, it's okay for me to ask.
No problem.
You have had a long history in this industry with ZSD Development. And prior to that, you affiliated and did quite a bit of work with Belgravia as well, a very reputable builder. What do you attribute your success to? Because your projects, especially in the latter half of your career, do tremendously well. What's your secret sauce?
There's a certain amount of repetitiveness to what we do. So you got to kind of hone your craft a little bit. I haven't deviated in product type, in really a lot in construction type, and certainly not in market. So I have really only ever built new construction for sale housing, and I've been doing the same thing for a long time. And so at some point, my mother used to say to me, you become an expert in something after 10 years. So I've developed a certain expertise, and with that comes a certain gut instinct. And my gut instincts have gotten a little looser and more fluid over the years. But in all truth, it's just kind of being doing the same thing and trying to be, it's a cumulative process. You really have to learn from what you did the last time. Try not to make the same mistake twice, which we've done. But as I said, the kind of evolution from the Hamptons, which was the first 4-bed product we did, to Peoria Green, to Madison, you can watch the evolution of the product type and the response to the market. That's how you get better. That's how you get good.
No, and I love that because I think there's so much truth in that. You hit on 2 points that really resonate with myself. Number one, I think for us all to get great at whatever our craft is, it is a consistency that most people do not have the ability to really do, right? It is not about being awesome at something. It's about being great at something and being able to do that again and again and again and again. And that's where most people fall short. So kudos to you to have that tenacity and that consistency in it. I know some days are more trying than others. The other thing that I think you said in there that I talk a ton about here, especially because of my environment growing up, I grew up in an area where there was this pressure of perfection, right? We all were taught that you do not fail, you do not make mistakes. That is a weakness that if you do, nobody sees. But I think that there's so much truth in the sense that in your line of work, in my line of work, in life in general, the more times we fall down, the more times we truly understand how we get better, wiser, and we do it smarter the next time.
Yeah, there's some cliche to it, but I made a $300,000 mistake on a project in 2006. And the person I work for, it was at Belgravia, the person I work for said to me, didn't say you're fired. He said, you'll never make that mistake again. And it stuck with me. It's, 17, 18 years later, I still remember what it was. I've never made the same mistake twice. It happens. It's partly how you learn. I don't yell at people when they make mistakes. I just implore them not to do the same thing again. But it happens. But that's also how you learn. And sometimes you screw up so badly and then you're like, oh, that was really interesting. And you can't anticipate everything. That's what I say. Like, we redesign units. It's painful. But that's what we do. Sure. And that's not so much looked at as a mistake. It's we put our best foot forward. It didn't work. And then you have to have the wherewithal to be able to pivot and say, okay, I'm going to try something else. And I've got to succeed. I have to find a path to success. And the only way is to keep trying. Nothing just comes. Nothing just happens.
Zev, thank you so much for being here. This has been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate being able to share you with everyone else. You and I have a lot of these great conversations from time to time. I have a tremendous amount of respect for you.
Thank you.
Which is not something that I say for a lot of developers in our realm. So I just really greatly appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.